Well, today marks the centenary celebration of the late ANC President Oliver Tambo, one of South Africa's most renowned leaders. Joining us now for a look at the life and times of Oliver Tambo is former President of South Africa, Kgalema Motlanthe, who will be delivering a keynote address this evening for the University of Stellenbosch Business School on responsible leadership. Mr. President, if you could kindly paint a picture for us as to the Oliver Tambo you remember and that we should cherish.
Well, the Oliver Tambo that I remember was somebody who was a teacher, a lawyer, a scientist, mathematician, a practicing Christian, and a Democrat. He was a very important leader of the movement who had a very deep understanding of the meaning of democracy. When he was asked to act in the place of Walter Sisulu, who had been restricted by government from his responsibilities as the Secretary General of the ANC, Oliver Tambo formed the understanding that such banning orders and restrictions interfered with the free expression of the members of the ANC in elected leaders.
President Motlanthe, the culture of the ANC, of course, has changed over the years. When O.R. Tambo was in charge of the ANC, it was in exile, it was banned, it was underground, but it had a rich culture of diversity and of contestation and indeed some internal democracy. How has that culture changed in what we see in the ANC of today? And I suppose another way of asking the question is, what would O.R. Tambo think of where the ANC is now?
Well, as I said, Oliver Tambo was a lawyer by training and therefore had been tasked to draft the amendment of the ANC Constitution in 1998. And so he was someone who understood the importance of the Constitution in keeping the organization together and regulate how internal democratic practices were to be sustained.
Mr. President,
and therefore today what we observe is a deviation from such adherence and uphold the Constitution of the ANC.
Mr. President, when we look at the life and times of Oliver Tambo as we celebrated what would have been his centenary birthday, he led the ANC for quite an extended period of time, and Oliver was, still elected as president in as far back as 1985, which showed his staying power and his ability to lead. Right now, the ANC does not have that moral compass that existed during the times of Oliver Tambo. It does not even enjoy the same kind of international acclaim, if you will, for that moral leadership. How does the ANC find its way back to the ANC of Oliver Tambo?
Well, any organization is judged on the basis of its policies and how leaders articulate those policies. Now today, our leaders come across as people who diminish the standing and prestige of the organization through their own announcement and articulation, whereas their erroneous actions.
The implication, President Motlanthe, what you're saying is that President Zuma should resign. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we made that call right at the beginning of the serial wrongdoings, but it is now clear that appealing to change only comes to naught.
Mr. President, let's move on to issues more current. You were quoted today in the newspapers as saying that we should not be taking democracy for granted. In light of what you are going to be giving a lecture on today at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, could you please marry the two? What do you mean when you say we should not take democracy for granted? To what are you warning South Africans?
Well, firstly, that democracy also entails active citizenry in understanding the Constitution, in understanding their rights, and therefore in a position to hold public representatives to account in an active manner.
President Motlanthe, you yourself have been president. We're calling it to you. It's a courtesy to a former president, although you are indeed a former president. You know what it's like to be in that seat. You know what it's like to move the levers of government. Although you weren't in for that long, you certainly did make decisions and so on. Looking at where we are now, people have talked about a state of capture. The state has been captured, and people within the ANC are openly saying this. At what point does the ANC lose its way to such an extent that people like yourself and former ministers and others who have spoken out against the present goings-on, at what point do you find it impossible to remain in the organization because it's clearly departed so far from the values of where you're standing?
Yes, indeed, there's been a deviation from the values inspired some of us to join the African National Congress, and we remain committed to those values, and therefore the decision to dissociate ourselves from the ANC can only come at a point when one realizes that there is no possibility whatsoever of saving the ANC and therefore ensuring that it finds resonance with South Africans in terms of how to view the present and their path that they believe would be able to take us to a better and stable future. So, so, so what keeps us in the ANC today is that belief that there are this nucleus inside the ANC which continue to subscribe and to hold very dear the values of the ANC, because the ANC existed for 105 years as a servant of people. And so at the point when it becomes irrelevant, we will all quit.
President
We'll
Motlanthe,
all call it a day.
yeah, you have been the President of South Africa. We remember it as an unblemished period, a calm period, and a lot of decisions were made. Would you consider making yourself available as President again? And I ask that for two reasons. The one is that there are factions in the ANC, and maybe you could be a uniting presence with the experience you have, and you don't appear to be part of a faction. That's the first part of the question. Would you make yourself available? And secondly, have you been approached by people in the ANC to be a unifying presidential candidate?
No, I have not been approached by anybody in the ANC, except that some young people years ago thought that I should consider failing self to lead the organization, and I expect that better here, because the country needs pressure on energies and innovation for it to go forward. And there's really no advantage in embarking on a process of deciding leaders have in leadership. Otherwise, not stagnating, regressing, because we the fresh ideas of younger people who understand the talent affecting young people today.
Mr. President, you're giving this lecture, as we had earlier alluded today, with the theme and the key message of it being responsible leadership. Now, in the South African context, leadership starts at the top, and the president has been found wanting on more than one occasion. And the subsequent program trickles down and affects every other part of government. Now, this was not necessarily a problem when you were president of the country, but how do we get ourselves out of this problem that seems so endemic, as I have said, that most South Africans, citizens, see it as a problem that trickles down from the top. So we have a problem from the top right down the bottom of the ladder. How do we get out of this situation?
Well, earlier on I alluded to the importance of an active system that covers the local as well, and there's an opportunity coming up in 2019 for the electorate to fully apply mind, the collective mind, and try to elect a party which would be able to put forth upright and responsible leadership, so that because if the electorate continues to be passive and vote on basis for sentimental, this will be able to move.
President Motlanthe, what would your message be to investors, to the ratings agencies and so on? The consensus seems to be that as a result of the mini budget this week, although the view was it was admirable that the finance minister was honest and said things were bad, didn't try to paper it over, the fact that they're bad means that a downgrade is likely, according to the experts. What would you say to those people now heading for the downgrade and investors generally?
Well, firstly, in South Africa, my view is that we do need the business sector to unite and speak with one voice, so the economics should really be informed by the understanding of business sector, other than what's going on now, whereby it's deep distrust between government and the business sector, to the extent that only the black section of BEE beneficiaries are the ones who the government in terms of fashioning policy, because policy is important. Can either serve for building the economy or scupper the economy. And so I would think that the investors would, by and large, get from South African business community. So the first step would be to win over South African business community, because they are the ones who would be able to persuade foreign investors that South Africa is an important investment aspect.
Mr. President, you mentioned that with regards to the economic narrative of this country, that you would like more business unity, speaking with one voice and really leading from the front. I am going to play the devil's advocate and say that half of the problems that we are in right now are self-inflicted and largely as a result of our politics. The trust between business and government was broken irretrievably when President decided to fire Finance Minister, and it's been difficult to foster that trust since. So my question to you is, as much as we expect the South African business community to speak with one voice and stand firm and support efforts to raise economic outlook, what do we expect from the political collective? And by that, I specifically refer to your beloved movement of the African National Congress and the power that it wields. How much should we expect from them, and what do you expect from them?
Well, firstly, government has got to create an environment conducive for predictability and trust to emerge between the private sector and government, by ensuring that the policies are jointly arrived at and that those policies would not be changed willy-nilly at a drop of a hat, because it's that unpredictability which bedevils, the relations of trust between government and the private sector. So what we expect from a governing party is to understand that the private sector is an important core, if not the spine of any economy, and therefore that they should be treated as partners in taking the country's economy forward, rather than being treated as loose elements that would have to be, dragooned by legislation which is forever amended, and policies that are chopped and changed on an ongoing basis.
That is the former President of South Africa, Kgalema Motlanthe.